Thanks, everyone, for joining us back at the Project Censored Radio Show. We're very glad to welcome to the show Vanessa Nosie, who's a mother, a matriarch in protection of her tribe's ancestral home and sacred places, and a community organizer who's also employed with the San Carlos Apache Archaeology Department and Tribal Historic Preservation Office as an archaeology aide. Vanessa, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Absolutely. So, Vanessa, I'd like to just go back briefly in order to go forward and give listeners kind of a very rough outline of what we're discussing here. Back in 2014, at the last minute in the Guaranteed to Pass National Defense Authorization Act, then Senators John McCain and Jeff Flake threw in a rider handing what is known as Oak Flat inside the Tonto National Forest over to Foreign Resolution Copper Company to build one of the world's largest copper mines. Now, we've covered the issue of protected versus unprotected land on the show before, but I feel like people might be understandably confused by how a quote unquote national forest, supposedly forest land or protected land, could be gutted for a mining project. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the misconception or like the confusion of it is that we think National Forest Service, under the United States Department of Agriculture, that their job and their priority is to manage these forests, right? And to protect the natural resources. But that's not the case. When what their job is to do, and why and how we found this out, with the the Oak Flat issue, is that their priority is to make profit off of our natural resources. So, there's that lie and the confusion that they have like campgrounds and it's federally protected under, the United States government and and so forth. So any federal land, forest land is up for grabs because they want to profit off our natural resources. And it's a sad situation because at the very, very beginning, before the land exchange was put into the Midnight Rider in 2014, the Tonto National Forest Service was against this mine. They were telling them that this is going to be devastating and detrimental to the environment and to the land. But because of Senator John McCain and Anchor Patrick and Jeff Flake and all of them that were bought into supporting Resolution Copper, they feel their hands are tied, you know. But it always goes back to making a moral decision, regardless, and standing your ground. So yeah, I mean that's the bottom line, is that they're gonna make money off our natural resources because there's free campsites and there's campsites that you have to pay for, and it's very few for them to that are free, so they make revenue off these campsites. Well, now you got a foreign mining company that comes in, and the United States Department or United States government just turns around and hands it over to them.
Right. Yeah, that seems abundantly clear. And I want to shift to talking specifically about the place. And I think oftentimes the question that's posed to Indigenous peoples is, could you talk about how this place is sacred? And while I would like to hear your thoughts on that if you're willing to share, but I think a bigger question that doesn't get asked as often is, why isn't any land sacred to the colonizer? And there have been many books and essays written about this, like the concept of Wetiko from Jack D. Forbes's book, Columbus and Other Cannibals. But Vanessa, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that question. Why is no land sacred to the colonizer?
What I've been taught is that we're old to the old ways. So it's very much a part of our life, still present. And we're new to this new way of life as Indigenous people. People have constantly said, like, you hear, oh, that happened so many years ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. What happened to your people? Like, get over it. You kind of come across, you know, those type of people that don't understand, right? And then we have our allies and our non-indigenous communities of support, right? They get it. Some of them get it. But what we've learned in this process of why some of them are so quick and easy to turn their head and not acknowledge the sacredness, what is the spirit, that God has created all things. We believe from the pebble to the wind to the trees to the animals to us as humans. I mean, everything that is breathing and is alive. And that's a part of our religion. But what happened is that it's so very much recent for us, because I can go back to my second my great grandfather that was a chief and that was with Geronimo. Can you imagine? I mean, that's only two greats. That's my grandfather, my great grandfather, and then him that was with our people fighting to continue to exist. And you go back to the history of indigenous people, it was up to like the mid 70s when when the Bureau of Indian Affairs quit taking us from our families and sending us to boarding school. It was I live next to a 20-minute border town where up to the 70s they were no dogs, no Indians allowed. So a lot of this, I mean, I'm born in 1979. I mean, that's so, I don't feel old, you know. I can I mean, I can remember up to like my earliest years of life, and I can't imagine that was still happening to my people. Relocation Act, um uh the boarding school era, even to be placed as prisoners of war. So like, for instance, my father is first reservation born. I'm second reservation, and I'm a mom of 4 girls. So my girls are third generation reservation born, and my grandmother was placed as prisoner of war here. And so it's so much alive. It's not even, you hear the wording of historic trauma. It's not for us. It's still very much present. So going back to your question is, what happened to the non-indigenous communities? What happened um to Europeans? What's happened to, when they fled here for religious prosecution? They were already been assimilated. They have been assimilated way far longer than what we have. And what's crazy is that we as indigenous people, like for myself and my family, we don't look at anybody any different. You are indigenous from somewhere. You have your roots. But what happened is that was all cut off. As for us, we still feel the chains around our wrists, around our ankles. Everybody else forgot it. They've assimilated. They don't even know it exists anymore. And if you go back to queens and kings of, when it was human form that placed fear of religion into their own people. So you look at these kings and queens, and they took different stories out from the Bible to place fear for power and greed, right? And so they were already using religion as a form of colonization, of assimilation, of divide and conquer, right? So what happened is, why a lot of people that are non-indigenous don't understand, it's because they've been assimilated far too long. Now, as Apache Stronghold, we're telling everybody, you need to wake up. You need to know where you come from, and you need to remember you're no different than us. Because if you go back to the biblical stories that are written, Moses talked to God in the mountain through a burning bush. Noah got messages to save the people and the animals, to create this boat. You look at Abraham, you look at all these real significant people in Christianity, or in the Bible, they're no different than what our prophets and our holy people have stated. Just now, today, people don't recognize that. The non-Indigenous communities don't realize that what we've witnessed happening to them, we don't want to happen to us. And so, that's where we see the division, or what, like your question, like why don't non-natives or non-Indigenous people feel that this is sacred? It's because they've been far assimilated. They don't feel the chains anymore, and they've adapted to it. And they have to go back. They have to wake up and be like, we are no different. We have indigenous places and holy sites where our people have come from. And God spoke to us the same way he's speaking to these people. So, that's, I guess, an example or of a way that we look at, like, go back, find out who you are. We're not telling you to leave. We're just saying, find your roots, learn where your people come, because you are no different. We're trying to not only protect ourselves from the further of assimilation of losing who we are spiritually, but we're also trying to wake up the world, because we at the forefront fighting for our sacred places, the places that are at threat now, means that your religion is at stake. As being First Nation on this continent, First Nation of this land here in this so-called America, we're trying to wake you guys up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that framing. I think that's helpful for people who do relate to the Bible, or really, I guess any religious books or stories or things like that. I'm also curious, like, could you talk a little bit about what is known as Oak Flat, and what that place, how the Apache have historically, and still how you interact with that place?
We believe that's where God has touched the earth, where our direct connection comes from. And so being there and being raised with the understanding that God, creator, we say Yosin, has created all living things. This is a place where our deities, our, I guess, like our angels, our holy people, our holy beings come from. And this is a place where you could be born there, you could live your life there, and you can die there. It has abundance of food and medicine and water. It has so much life there, and that's the sacredness. When you touch the ground, when you walk into Oak Flat, you can feel it. This is a place where our girls, when they transition from a young girl into a woman, this is that place that happens where our ceremony, our ancient ceremony that was in time of memorial, that was given to us by God, is where this is the exact place where these girls can become a woman, be reborn. This is a place where our boys go through their transition too and have sweat. This is a place where we can pick our chichil, our acorn that goes into our ceremonies, that go into our everyday lives. This is where we pick the berries that help nourish our body, our mind, and our spirit. That is very much a part of our religion. So there's there's so much of importance of our way of life, our religion that is tied to the land, that is tied to Oak Flat, that if Resolution Copper is to win this land exchange and the destruction that's going to happen there, that means our spirit, the spirit of this holy place, the religion of our people, that spirit that we all have, will be gone forever, because it becomes a 2-mile wide crater, a mile deep down, as big as the Eiffel Tower, will be gone. It's not like I could go over there and still pray, go over there and be able to teach, because our way of life is oral history, is oral religion. So as a mom, my responsibility as an Apache woman, as an Apache mom, is to give these teachings that was passed down to me to my daughters. If it's gone forever, I will not have that opportunity. My children will not know what it is to be an Apache. So I have 4 girls. I have 3 of them that are adults. I have a 23 or 24, 23, and a 19. I've had the blessed gift, even when we were feared for our lives or worried about getting in trouble, we still went back because it's outside of our reservation, right? It's outside of the jurisdiction that the United States government said, this is where you can only be. We risked it, going back, going to Oak Flat, going to these holy places. And I was able to gain those teachings from my grandmother and those before me. Well, my responsibility is to give those to my children so that we can continue to exist. So like I said, I have 3 older kids, older children, older daughters, but I have a 3-year-old. My worry, one of my worries is, how am I going to teach her how to be an Apache if it is gone forever? We all know there's a difference of how we can perceive and and conduct ourselves when we're able to visual it, right? Or we're able to go to places, we're able to touch things, all our senses. But if I can only tell her a story, it's different. So as my daughter, we're at a crossroad. My older girls are able, I knew that I was going to raise them in this fight. I knew that the fight for them, and when they took their first breath, because we weren't supposed to exist, but I knew they had that opportunity or option to pick up a fight, to pick up the fight. My daughter, we don't even, it's so uncertain that we don't know if she'll be able to even pick up the fight. So we're at a crossroad. Either are you just going to know the idea of what it is to be Apache? Are you going to be able to be Apache? And that's why Oak Flat is so important on the indigenous side, on the Apache side, because all the teachings and the spirit that we consume or that we embrace is there. That sacredness, that spirit that is alive, that God has touched. And if it's gone, then that's a part of us. We will be gone. And that was what was prophesized in our people, was that the last war was going to be our religion. And it's on trial right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And with regards to the future, I wanted to get into the status right now, because in the middle of May, so we're recording this on May 30th, so roughly 15 days ago, a press release came out that I read on Apache Stronghold's website that the Ninth Circuit of Appeals had denied your request to be heard, and now the next step is to go to the Supreme Court. So I'm curious, what is the status now in terms of that case? And yeah.
Um, well, it was a close case, especially with the 11 judges. It was 6-5. I think a lot of people didn't think it would be so close. Because when you look at our case, it's on religion. And and the United States government does not want to talk about religion. They're not going to want to make a decision on it, or even acknowledge it, especially because what's going to happen is that they have to acknowledge the first people of this land. They're going to have to acknowledge the indigenous people and say that, yes, they're still alive and breathing and their religion does exist. And so, it's been an amazing opportunity to witness, because regardless, I can be angry. I have every right to be angry as an indigenous person. My people have all indigenous people have witnessed genocide, from our lives, our ancestors being murdered, raped, to genocide of assimilation, to cut off everything that it is to be who we are. That's when it came in as when the United States campaign was a good Indian is a dead Indian. But when they couldn't kill us all, it was kill the Indian, save the man. And so that's still very much alive, because to kill the Indian is to kill our spirit, to kill our religion, our holy places, and that would cut us off completely. So I can be mad, I can be angry, I'm hurt. I've witnessed so many things within my own family of of genocide and racism and trauma. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because at some point we're going to have to be acknowledged. At some point we need to not be the dust that they sweep underneath the carpet. Because why? As we as Indigenous people are at the forefront fighting for all people. Oak Flat is just not an Apache war anymore. It's everybody's war. It's a world, and it's an international fight now. Because if our natural resources continue to be raped and taken and destroyed, no one is able to live on this earth without water, air, the food that the earth provides, all of it. How are we going to survive? How is it going to look 7 generations down for all people? And then as a religious aspect, if my religion is at stake, so is yours. So whether you are a person of faith or not, when you look at this fight, you have to see the ugliness, that evil that's behind it. And so that's why I say I try to be hopeful in this fight, because it's a time of unification for all people. It's a time of unification and solidarity to stand together, because before colonization, before European settlers came, all tribes, no matter where they were located and no matter what type of tribe they were, we were one drum, one circle, one prayer. And that was prophesied to us, because they said this evil that was happening on the other side of the world, that was conquering and dividing and was of colonization that was happening to their people. He came to this side of the world, but we were so strong in our spirituality that it couldn't penetrate its evil, but it did promise us that one day he would be back. So that's what we see today, is that this evil is back, not in human form, but in corporation, in colonization. And it's not just trying to penetrate its evil within the indigenous people, but it's a collective of all people. And now that we're all here on this land, we have to find a solution to protect each and every one of us. We have to come together. So now our circle is as indigenous people are now making a voice and saying enough is enough, that we're no longer want to be in prison, and we no longer want to allow this corporate government control us and take away who we are, our spirit. We're forming that circle, but there's a spot missing, and that's everybody, all race, all nationalities, to come and form this circle. And that's what we're witnessing now with Oak Flat. There's so many people that want to help support and protect Oak Flat, that we're closing that circle. And that's what gives me hope. That's what turns my anger into, no, we're ready. Bring on the Supreme Court. We're ready. We're ready to fight. This is that last battle that we are witnessing, and we're going all the way. We are going all the way. There's no questions about it. Our attorneys are working on it. We are heading to the Supreme Court. It will continue to fight this judicial system so that our people, and not just our people, but all people are being heard. Because we have so many different faiths that have signed on to amicus brief, so many different organizations, so many people of all walks of life and are on our amicus brief. So we're ready. Resolution Copper, United States government, bring it on. We're ready. And no matter what the outcome is, we will fight to the end. And that means even if it takes our life. If I have to stand there at Oak Flat and let it take my life, I'm going to let it take my life. And I know that's where my father sits. I know that's where a lot of people sit, so um, I'm willing to give it everything it has to my last breath. And so that's where Apache Stronghold is. That's where we're at right now.
Thank you, Vanessa, so much for sharing that. And yeah, I think to your point, I've noticed as a non-Indigenous person in a lot of the work that I've done with, like whether they be pipeline fights or forest defense, that a lot of non-Indigenous peoples have come to the realization that if Indigenous land is not considered sacred, then no land is, because it's all Indigenous land. Because we are in a colonized in a colonized space. So I think that I agree that I think that that's a very hopeful aspect of this. And I want to before we wrap up here, I noticed on Apache Stronghold's website there was also a really, I guess not shocking when you understand what the US government is, but a really terrifying note about um, as part of the land exchange, the topic of all federally owned land in the West was brought up, including all reservations in the West. And previously on the show, we have had Leona Morgan from Hall No talking about the proposed mining just outside of the Diné Reservation in what's known as Grand Canyon. So this is something that's happening across the West. But could you talk about this idea of basically all federally owned land being open for this kind of ecocide, including reservations?
Well, it's a form of manipulation. And why I say that is because we're facing a huge climate change, right? Well, we're in a climate crisis. And I was just talking with a friend, and it was funny. Well, it's not funny. What's sad is that when you go back and you look at the discussions and conversations that were happening around climate, right? It was like climate change is happening, and then it was climate crisis. Well, now they're calling it climate mitigation. And with the United States government and how they run their government, it's a corporate government. And so when you look at President Biden's Go Green bill, how is that even possible? And so a lot of what you see when you talk about federal land is, okay, it's when they say federal land, that means it's property of the United States. It's land that belongs to them. And so they're looking for every which way to make profit. They don't care about you and I. They don't care about the children or those yet to be born, of what kind of life and world that we're going to be leaving them or creating for them. And so with Oak Flat, in the United States, that's a prime example of showing them that they don't care about the people. And why I say that is because they're willing to give so-called U.S. soil to a foreign mining company, and the copper that they're supposed to extract, 75% is going to China. So not only are you giving it to Rio Tinto and BHP, that are from a whole different two different country, or a whole different country, is going to have property here in the U.S. soil. and they don't care. So when you look at, so then going into reservation bound, well, a lot of the misconception of about indigenous people is like, oh, they got reservation, they got their own land. That's not true. Every federally recognized tribe that is recognized by the United States government sits on their concentration camp. What they did is just change the wording to manipulate people from a concentration camp as prisoners to reservation. Then what's underneath that is that every reservation that a tribe sits on that is federally recognized is trust land, meaning it not owned to that tribe. So me as an enrolled tribal member of the San Carlos Apache tribe and residing on the San Carlos Apache reservation, I don't own the piece of land that I reside at. And nor does my tribe own the 1 million or however many acres that the United States allows us to be on. So when you go back when Trump was president, he was threatening to take federal land, even reservations, so that they can take the natural resource, whether, you know, from lumber to minerals to the water to metal, because they want to profit off of it. So as indigenous people, we're not safe. This is not our land. And San Carlos has actually been downsized several times from when first placed here as prisoner of war, because the state of Arizona and the United States found copper, found gold, found silver. And so San Carlos sits next to the copper triangle. So our reservation boundaries, or our area that, you know, we weren't allowed, that we were placed on, has been downsized. So we're not safe. It's already been in talks that they want to downsize so many federal lands and reservations and reserves, because they want these natural resources and these special minerals and metals to profit off of. So, you know, it all goes back. If you look back at how the United States was founded, and the deceit, not only did they tell the indigenous people, but all people, is that's the root. That's the root of this evil is this corporate life, this colonized way of living. And enough is enough. And that's why it's important that we all wake up and understand what's at stake. You know, because after they take away federal land and reservation, who's to say that your property is not up for grabs?
Yeah, absolutely. And as many people could tell you, there's a lot of people who have been forced off their land because a pipeline is going to go through there, or, you know, a compressor station for fracking or what have you. So it is already happening in that way. Vanessa, I really appreciate you sharing so much information. And speaking of closing that circle, where is a good place for folks to go to learn more and potentially join the fight to save Oak Flat?
Please get on our website, www.apache-stronghold.com. And we have all our social media accounts, from X to Instagram and Facebook, that we'll be posting whether events or ceremony, you know, because the Apache Stronghold is a spiritual group. And we're asking for everybody that believes how important this is, or even if you have questions or don't know, please reach out to us, whether it's through our website or social media accounts. Reach out to us, because it is important that you know that this fight that's happening, because Oak Flat is such a big issue, from environmental injustice to religious injustice. And so, you know, I really encourage people to go to our websites. It has from events to our marches to the legislation. It has press release. It has videos and so many of important information that is on on our website. On the other hand, please reach out to your Congress people, reach out to your senators, tell them, write to them, flood their phones, email them to not destroy a holy site, to not destroy Mother Earth, to not contaminate the water and the air. Please reach out to them because it's federal land. No matter what state you're in, you can reach out to your elected officials from local, state to federal. Reach out to them and tell them no resolution copper, protect Oak Flat, to save Oak Flat, because this issue is we're at the forefront. Like I said, it's not just an Apache issue anymore. Yeah, at the very beginning when we started, because we've been fighting this since the late 1990s, going into the 2000s. So we've been fighting for 20 years, fighting to protect Oak Flat. And so, just get informed, reach out to your political officials, and get on our website, and prayer is vital, because we're fighting something really evil, and it's not in physical form, it's in that spiritual realm. And so we need to, those that want to sign on as amicus brief onto our case, get a hold of the Beckett Law Firm. They have attorneys there to help, and just continue to stand with us.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this vital issue.
Thank you for having us, because it's really important to get our stories, because I'm not just telling my story, but I have so many people, from my own people to my other indigenous communities to non-indigenous communities supporting it, because it's about all of us. It's about all of us. And we need to be that one drum, one prayer, one circle.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you again.
Thank you.